My son and his wife called me a maid. They humiliated me in my own home. But they didn't know that all the property is still registered in my name. This is a Channel Sarah Stories. Everyday incredible stories about strong women with difficult lives are posted here. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers, so if you are interested in such stories, subscribe to my channel and enjoy the exciting stories. And write in the comments which country and city you are watching this video from. I am very interested in that. By the time the laughter reached the kitchen, it had already chosen a target. I was standing over a sheet pan of roasted carrots, palm open to test the heat, when Olivia's mother, lacquered and lemony, asked in her champagne voice, "And who is Margaret again?" It was the kind of question people ask when they already know and just want to see where you place yourself. Olivia didn't miss a beat. "She's our unofficial maid," she said. "It's like having a sweet little housekeeping fairy." The room answered with that bright, brittle laughter that says cruelty is still fashionable if you pair it with canapes. Even Ethan chuckled. My Ethan, my forever late to soccer practice. Always hungry boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder with his mouth open and his trust turned all the way up. He looked at his shoes a half-second later, the way someone does when they realize they've laughed in the wrong place. The second didn't save me. Something old and important in my chest stood up. It set down the spatula, took off the stained oven mitt like a uniform I'd been conscripted into, and walked me down the hall without asking permission. In the spare room, the one with the closet I kept stocked for emergencies Olivia texted me about at the last minute, I closed the door and counted to 50 with my back against it, the way you steady a picture frame after a slam. The house had been mine once, not just in sentiment, but in ink. After Harold died, I added Ethan and Olivia to the deed because grief makes you generous with edges you should keep. "Security," Ethan said at the kitchen table, sliding the papers toward me, and I let myself imagine my name multiplying instead of shrinking. "Love, I have learned, is a superb forgery. The carrots burned. No one noticed." I slept in the spare room, listening to the glossy party deflate, heels wandering, ice clinking itself tired. When the house finally exhaled, I opened the closet safe, took out the packet of keys I'd kept since the old life, and counted them like beads. Front door, back door, garage door, storage cage, the little brass one that fit the garden shed where Harold kept his tools and relief. Keys are heavier than paper. That is the point. At sunrise, the house was hung over with good taste. I put the keys on the kitchen counter where Olivia likes to stage her sponsored breakfasts. When she patted in, eyeliner smudged, robe tied like a treaty, I met her in the calm at the center of me I had mistaken all these years for resignation. "Everything you just called me," I said evenly, "you may keep. I'm returning the rest." Olivia blinked, rehearsed smile still waking up. "Margaret, don't be dramatic." "It was a joke. Jokes need love to be funny," I said. There wasn't any in the room. Ethan wandered in, hair stubborn, phone in hand. "Mom." I set the keys between us like a border. "You'll be fine," I said, because they would. "You have each other. You have your parents. You have your followers. You don't have me." I packed the overnight things I kept there just in case. Toothbrush, sweater, the paperback I never finished because someone always needed the printer fixed, and walked out the front door I had once painted the color of aspiration. On the porch, the morning was the particular blue that forgives. I did not leave a note. Notes are for people who intend to explain. The little apartment on Maple, the one great Aunt Ruth left me under a crocheted Afghan and a strict will, took me in like a stray finally choosing a home. It smelled faintly of cedar planks and old paper, the good kind, library paper that remembers hands. The windows stuck at the corners, the kettle wheezed before it worked. Freedom is not always ergonomic. I put my phone face down on the counter and let it vibrate itself, exhausted. "Ethan, you okay?" "Olivia, please don't make this weird." Olivia again. "Mom's sorry if she offended you." Then nothing. Then a flood. Apologies that were really instructions, explanations that were really edits of the thing that had happened, which was simple. They had said out loud who I had let myself become. That first night, I found Ruth's letter in the drawer where she kept rubber bands and proof. "Don't forget, Margaret," she'd written in her careful schoolteacher script, "that love is service. but service is not servitude. Here are the spare keys to yourself. I laughed, the kind of laugh that startles your lungs, and cried into the same breath because they are twins. I slept under the Afghan and woke up without an alarm or a list or a text. Clarity has a sound, silence with purpose. I made coffee too strong and drank it too hot and said out loud, to nobody, that's enough now. The sentence sat in the room like furniture. Around noon, my feet took me without asking to the bookshop on Alder, the one with the bell that tings like a conscience and the owner who recommends poetry to people who come in angry. I had seen him once before arranging a table of paperbacks like a stage set, tall, shoulders honest, eyes that smiled before his mouth did. His name tag said Michael as if the word could be trusted. Welcome back, he said, as if I'd been expected. We kept the seat on the window for you. You don't know me, I wanted to say. But perhaps I did not know me either, and someone had to start. I left with a novel about a woman who wakes up in her own life, and a notebook for writing down the parts of my day that belonged to me. On the first page, I wrote, "Return keys, keep the door." It looked, for the first time in a long time, like a beginning. The second time I saw Michael, he was arguing with a stack of hardcovers in the way patient people argue. Gently, with logic, like conceding would be a kindness, but wrong. Spine's out, he told them. You're prettier that way. The bell tattled on me, and he glanced up, then smiled the sort of recognition you give not to strangers, but to fixtures, lamps, reliable weather, the woman who has begun to take up a little space by the window. Back for more, he asked. For proof, I said, and set my notebook on the counter like a membership card. What kind? His hands were careful even with receipts. That leaving doesn't have to be loud to count, I said. That I am not a ghost when I stop doing everyone's dishes. He slid a book toward me. The Art of the Unapology. Not a real title, but it should be. The actual book was essays about women who refused to flatten themselves into usefulness and were accused of arrogance for surviving. This one sells out to people who whisper, he said. You can read whispering. In the afternoons, I began to haunt the shop the way I had haunted Ethan's laundry basket and Olivia's calendar. Except here, no one needed me to pre-soak or RSVP. Michael recommended poems for mornings when the kettle took too long to boil, and a slender memoir for nights when I wanted to practice being my own witness. He learned my laugh, which had rediscovered its center. I learned his habit of tapping the side of a book twice before handing it over, as if placing a small blessing on the transaction. I did not tell him my name, not out of coyness, but because names had been used lately as leashes, and I wanted to hear my voice without one. He did not ask. We spoke instead in titles and stupid jokes and the weather, which is a kind of biography in Oregon. On my 7th day of being no one's unpaid employee, a listing slid across my phone screen while I was pretending to read. Charming tutor on Birch, prime schools, designer updates. It was my house. Olivia's photographer had found the lights that made even the scuffed banister look like intentional patina. The copywriter bragged about an open-concept kitchen for entertaining. I had scrubbed that grout with a toothbrush. I sat down hard and forgot how to order air. You okay? Michael asked from the register, the good kind of concern. Offered, not worn like a uniform. I'm for sale, I said before my pride could edit it. Correction, my house is. It's still in my name. He tilted his head, listening the way some people do with their whole bodies. Do you need a lawyer or a locksmith? Maybe a calculator, I said, because being reduced to arithmetic felt less pathetic than being reduced to ache. That night, in Ruth's apartment, I did what women do when their lives try to shrink them. I opened the drawer that holds documents. The deed said what I knew it said. The taxes said I had been paying them. The utilities said I had been subsidizing a brand. Pride likes to pretend it didn't keep the receipts. It does. I wrote to Olivia, please remove the listing. We will discuss the house after I've made a plan. She replied with a voice note, her favorite format for plausible deniability, full of breathy sincerity and softened blame. We thought you wanted to downsize, Margaret. It's so much work for you. We're helping. Helping is a verb people use when they've taken your chair. Ethan texted. O's parents said they can float us if this is too stressful. Love you, Mom. The sentence was a tourniquet on the wrong limb. By morning, my inbox included 3 urgent emails from a staging company and a chirpy note from a mortgage broker whose subject line read, "Congrats." I forwarded everything to a new address I made at midnight. Margaret.has.boundaries at. Then I called the county records office and introduced myself as a person with questions and a voice like a blade wrapped in linen. Paper, unlike people, does not get offended when you ask it to prove itself. When I told Michael 2 days later, he slid a lemon tart across the cafe table between us and said, "Every revolution needs sugar." He listened without interrupting, which, it turns out, is foreplay for the part of a woman that has been edited in drafts by everybody else. "You don't sound angry," he noted when I'd finished, surprised. "I am," I said. "But the anger is standing quietly in the corner holding a folder labeled plan." "Good," he said. "Anger needs tasks." Task 1. I checked the bank accounts I hadn't looked at, because trust is lazier than diligence. There were automatic transfers I had forgotten agreeing to, harmless in their individual smallness, collectively large enough to finance an aesthetic. Task 2. I called a consultant my friend Teresa swore, by Darren, who audits online businesses for people who suspect their image is eating their income. "Don't tell me who hired you," he said. "Just tell me what smells wrong." I told him about Olivia's mentorships, her partner giveaways, her masterclass, her distrust of documents that produce taxes. He whistled softly, a sound men make when they see a car headed for a guardrail and decide to watch. While Darren sniffed, I returned to the bookshop to practice not calling all this vengeance. Michael pulled a chair to the stockroom door and taught me the names of things, signatures, spine glue, the thrill of a box cutter under tape. I told him stories about Ruth, who had once taught me to darn socks, because throwing away a thing that can still hold together is a sin in some religions. We did not discuss Ethan. We did not discuss Olivia. We let the quiet do the heavy lifting. 3 days later, Darren sent a zipped file and a note that read, "Your nose was right." Inside, screenshots of fake addresses Olivia had used for brand homes, invoices to companies that do not file in our state, affiliate links that paid out to a shell domain with her initials bouncing behind it like a dog that didn't know it had escaped. There were no tax returns. There were, however, photos of rented kitchens presented as the house I designed on a budget. I did not feel vindicated. I felt tired in the deep way that old floors feel. Creaks you stop hearing until you try to sleep. I printed the file on Ruth's stubborn printer, which jammed and then forgave me. I addressed 2 envelopes to Olivia's parents because sometimes the universe requests witnesses. I added a sticky note to each, "For your records." I mailed them from the blue box outside the courthouse where Harold and I had once signed papers that made us a family. I stood a moment after the envelopes disappeared and said hello to the ghost of us and promised I was doing my best to remain honest. That afternoon, Olivia's Instagram went quiet, the way an orchestra does when the conductor drops her arms. Her website redirected to a white page that said nothing in a font that used to say so much. The masterclass link produced a 404 error and a soft failure in me that sounded like a laugh. Ethan did not text. Silence can be a bruise or a bomb. This one was both. When I passed the bookshop on my way home, the bell did its small miracle, and Michael looked up. "Proof?" he asked. "Progress," I said, and for the first time in a season, the word did not feel borrowed. By the end of the week, the charming tutor had sprouted a yard sign like a weed. I stood across the street with a paper cup of coffee and watched strangers tilt their heads at the porch as if it might nod back. The agent's flyer bragged about multi-generational potential. The irony almost bowed me. My name still lived on the deed. The taxes still said Walker. Darren's report lay on my table like a patient who needed the kind of surgery you can't perform with kindness alone. I copied the relevant pages. No tax filings, fake addresses, partnership deliverables that were really calendar entries with glitter, and tucked them into a new folder labeled Reality. Paper is heavy. That's what makes it useful. I called a lawyer recommended by the kind of friend who keeps names for when you finally decide to stop being nice. Her name was Patrice, and she had a voice like a well-made hinge, quiet until you needed it to turn. "We'll file a temporary restraining order on the sale," she said after 15 minutes. "You are the owner of record. If they forge signatures, they've graduated from rude to illegal. I signed documents in an office that smelled like citrus and intention. Patrice slid a copy of everything into a banker's box for me to take home. You're calm, she observed. I'm rehearsed, I said. I've been practicing leaving for years and mislabeling it staying. The next morning the listing read, pending in a hopeful font. By noon the status changed to hold. At 3 o'clock, Olivia's mother called me from a number that announces itself the way perfume does before it arrives. Margaret, she said. Histrionics framed as affection. What are you doing? Telling the truth with documents, I said. It makes a new sound in a room. That night Ethan texted, can we talk? 3 dots bloomed and withered while I waited. Not about Olivia. About the house. The house is a person in our family, so I said yes. We met in a strip of park that does its best with 4 trees and a bench that lists to the left. He looked younger without Olivia's posture propping him up. Older without the confidence of unchecked access. I didn't know she listed it, he began. She didn't list it, I said. She performed it. It's different. He sat. We watched a man teach a terrier to sit, and the terrier teach the man to laugh. Mom, he said finally, are we done? I am done being who I was allowed to be in that house, I answered. If you mean us, that depends on whether we both want us enough to pay the price. What price? Honesty that doesn't leave bruises. Boundaries that don't require applause. Rent, if you're living in a place you don't own. The last line surprised even me with its steadiness. Ethan blinked. We can't afford market rent. Then you will need a plan or a smaller dream, I said, and the sentence didn't even shake. 2 days later, Patrice delivered papers to the tutor's porch, noticed to vacate within 30 days, and texted me a photo of the envelope tucked like consequence between the door and the frame. Within an hour, Olivia posted a story of a teacup and a caption about haters and the universe testing your glow. Then, the story stopped, the way a faucet does when the city remembers the bill. Sponsors began to peel away like decals from a car you're trying to sell. Her masterclass portal redirected to a page that apologized in passive voice. Emails came. We value transparency. We will be reassessing. I imagined Olivia in their living room, surrounded by boxes that said fragile and a silence too large to post through. In the meantime, the county clerk stamped my injunction, the agent's sign disappeared overnight, and the porch returned to its natural state, a place where people wipe their feet and try again. Patrice looked pleased in a way professionals do when the gears behave. Next step, she said. You decide what you want, sell, rent, keep. I walked the block slowly, past hedges I'd trimmed with Harold in late October, past the neighbor kid's basketball hoop still tilting like it had an opinion. The decision came in layers. I didn't want to move back. I didn't want them to stay. I did want the house to return to dignity. Sell, I told Patrice, but on my terms. No staging that lies. Photos at noon when the paint is honest. An offer from a family that wants a house and not a backdrop. We listed. This time, truthfully, and it felt like letting an old friend go to a city where her skills are needed. 2 cash offers came in within 48 hours. Both wrote letters about noisy breakfasts and muddy soccer cleats. I chose the one with the worst grammar. They sounded like they actually eat at their table. Olivia's last message arrived the night the sale closed. You humiliated me. I responded with a sentence I could live with if read aloud at my funeral. I told the truth about the part that belonged to me. Then I turned off my phone and slept like someone who has stopped lending her name to other people's inventory. After the buyers moved in, the neighborhood sighed. The new family planted tomatoes in the plot where I once convinced zucchini to behave. They waved like people who mean it. I mailed them a note with the garbage schedule and the name of a plumber who answers calls from women on the first ring. Ethan and Olivia vacated with 35 minutes to spare, leaving behind a single box labeled Misk, like a confession. I carried it to my car because I'm old-fashioned about closure and because curiosity is one of my preferred sins. Inside, 3 candles that smell like dusted roses, a tangle of charger cords, and a photo of Ethan at 8, cheeks apple round, grinning under a construction paper crown that read King of Nothing. Harold's handwriting on the back. He's king of us anyway. I put the photo on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear Ruth had brought me from a teacher conference in 1983. Darren sent his final report, which read like the world's worst syllabus. Forgeries, inflated metrics, borrowed kitchens, and a masterclass curriculum copied from a forum where people trade confidence like coupons. I felt no glee, only the precise relief of a splinter finally out. Patrice asked if I wanted to pursue charges. I pictured depositions and rooms where smirks feed on fluorescent light. No, I said. I want a life that doesn't require me to keep remembering the worst version of us. So you're done? I'm accurate, I said. Done is for casseroles and job postings. Nora came over with a lemon cake iced like a sunrise and a bottle of something named for a saint who probably had nothing to do with bubbles. We ate on Ruth's mismatched plates and made a list titled What Survives. My back that still carries groceries, my hands that know how to fold towels just so, my curiosity, a rent-controlled apartment with windows that frame the sky like a painting the museum forgot to label. Add Michael, Nora said without lifting her eyes, because she is both kind and meddlesome. I wrote his name on the list in small letters and didn't dot the I. At the shop, Michael showed me the back room where the unsellable books live until they surprise him. Some covers make promises they can't keep, he said, handing me a battered paperback. But the sentences do their own work. I told him about the sale. He nodded, as if closing a chapter were a skill worth applauding. What will you do with the money? Not perform, I said. Maybe fund a thing that doesn't need my face. We designed it on the back of a delivery slip. A tiny reading room in the shop for people who aren't sure they belong in bookstores, the ones who come in to charge their phones and leave with a poem, the ones who whisper their questions like apologies. Michael would build shelves. I would choose chairs that forgive the spine. He surprised me by saying, I have a key for you, and then producing one, not to his apartment or anything you could misread, just a small brass key on a red cord to the side entrance, the door with a bell that is too shy for customers. If you ever need a place where you don't have to buy anything to be allowed in. I took the key and turned it in my palm the way you test a word in your mouth. Keys mean trust. They also mean responsibility. Thank you, I said, the phrase more muscular than it used to be. Later, I wrote in my notebook. He gave me a key. I didn't ask whose house it made me in. Then maybe my own. Ethan called from a number I didn't recognize. Algorithms change. Consequences don't. I got a job, he said without ceremony. Warehouse. Nights. It's not. Instagrammable. I'm proud, I said, careful not to weep gratitude into his ear like a reward. Do you need anything that isn't money? Advice? He offered, tentative. Pack a sandwich you actually want to eat at 2 a.m., I said. And find one person there who tells the truth, even when it would be cheaper not to. He laughed. It sounded new. Before we hung up, he added, I'm sorry, Mom. Not the text kind. The kind that makes you change your shoes. That's the only kind that fits, I said. After the call, I took the photo from my fridge and carried it to the reading room. Still raw wood and the good smell of sawdust. I set Ethan's 8-year-old crown self on the shelf where the dictionaries would go. King of nothing, I told him. King of enough. 3 weeks passed. In that time, I learned the afternoon light in the shop makes the dust perform ballet, that a fresh stack of paper can improve a day the way a good argument can improve a democracy, and that the world keeps happening whether or not you explain yourself to people who have rehearsed not hearing you. Ethan texted again, can we meet? No, Olivia. Just me. We chose the park with the tilted bench. He arrived with 2 coffees, and the posture of someone who has learned that eye contact is not a confession, but a conversation. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he said before the foam had time to settle. I'm here to understand why you left when I thought you were anchored. I was anchored to a version of me who couldn't swim, I said. It's not a compliment to insist a person drown beautifully. He looked at his hands. I've told myself a story for years, he admitted. That you liked doing the extra, that it made you feel needed. I did, I said, until it made me disappear. We talked without a referee for 40 minutes, about the way love can turn into labor if you don't look at it with the light on, about Olivia's need to curate a life, and my need to stop appearing in it as a prop, about Harold, gentle, practical Harold, whose absence had made me audition for my own house. I can't fix it, Ethan said finally, the admission that often begins the actual work. I don't know how to be your son without being your project. Then we'll practice, I said. Bring me a story once a week that isn't about money or weather. I'll bring you one that isn't about your childhood. We'll see if we like the adults we're being. He laughed, because negotiation works better than nostalgia and Promise Thursday. When he left, I stayed on the bench and watched a couple teach their toddler to fall and laugh about it. The sun nudged a cloud into a shape that wanted to be a ship and thought better of it. I felt neither triumph nor tragedy. I felt alignment, the quiet relief of a spine that has returned to its job. At the shop, the reading room opened on a Wednesday with no ribbon, just a pot of strong coffee and a card on the table. Sit. You don't have to deserve it. 2 high school girls claimed the corner chairs with algebra and despair, and we didn't make them buy anything. A man in a jacket that had seen better Saturdays stood by the dictionary shelf and mouthed the word solace, as if it were a password he had finally remembered. Michael and I pretended not to notice, which is a kind of noticing that doesn't embarrass the miracle. At closing, Michael handed me a small envelope. Inside, a brass plaque the size of a playing card. Ruth's room, it read. She lent you keys, he said. Seems fair to give her a door. I didn't cry. I sat on the floor and let my chest swell with a gratitude that didn't have to perform to count. That night, in Ruth's apartment, I wrote a check to a foundation that gives women small grants for big exits. First month's rent, a storage unit, a locksmith. I wrote in honor of the women who stopped apologizing in the memo line and thought about how many revolutions begin with a receipt. Spring edged in with its usual nonsense, magnolias boasting, rain arguing its case on the window panes. The shop's reading room earned its smudges, fingerprints on the glass, pencil ghosts on the tables, the soft bruise of 1,000 elbows. Every mark felt like proof. Every day someone sat who hadn't planned to and stayed longer than they meant to. Michael called it foot traffic. I called it church. On a Tuesday, he found me repairing the spine of a book like a nurse darning skin. Come with me, he said, and led me to the back, to a door I'd somehow not noticed. He unlocked it and pushed it open to reveal a narrow room with high windows and the kind of light that forgives. Along one wall, empty shelves. Along the other, a counter with a till, an old lamp, a stool waiting for a person who likes to balance. What is this? I asked, already suspecting. Yours, he said, if you want it. A small press corner. Out-of-print rescues. A little curation by someone who knows the difference between useful and used. I don't know how to run a shop, I said, because false modesty is a habit and habits like to audition for new parts. You know how to keep a room honest, he countered. The rest is inventory and sweeping. He slipped a key into my palm, this one on a blue cord. It opens at 10, or when you say so. For a long moment we stood in the doorway, 2 people dumb enough to believe in paper. I thought of the keys I had returned on a counter that smelled like curated breakfast, the ones that had chained me to a house I paid for with the wrong currency. I thought of Ruth and her teacher's handwriting, of Harold and his toolbox wisdom, of Ethan at 8 and Ethan now, learning how to carry his own groceries. Yes, I said. The word found its chair. We opened with no fanfare. I made a handwritten sign, edited by Margaret, and taped it askew. People wandered in and emerged holding titles I had loved in private for years, as if I'd been preparing for this job without knowing it. A woman bought a battered cookbook and told me her mother had made page 73 on holidays. A man bought a book of letters and promised to mail one by hand to someone who'd forgotten how to read him. I made change, then tea, then sense of myself. Ethan visited on a Thursday as promised. He brought me a story about a coworker who could lift a sofa alone, and a smaller story about the dignity of stacking boxes in neat columns when chaos would suffice. He didn't ask for money. I didn't offer solutions. We looked at each other like 2 people who might, with luck and practice, learn each other's adult names. At closing time, I locked the blue cord door and stood for a while in the little corridor between rooms, key warm in my hand, a pulse of metal that felt like permission I hadn't requested. If you had told me a year ago that freedom would look like shelving and sweeping and a plaque named for a woman who taught third grade until her knees said enough, I would have smiled politely and kept stirring the carrots. Back home, I opened my notebook to a fresh page and wrote, not as an affirmation, but as a ledger entry, the kind you can audit later without shame. I am Margaret Walker. Not the maid, not the martyr, the editor of a small room in a long life. I do not need permission, I need keys. Then I taped the page above my desk with library tape, the kind that holds without yelling, and made tea in the kettle that wheezes and answered Nora's text, a photo of a cake cooling on a rack. With one of my own, a photo of the brass plaque under afternoon light. Look who got her name back, I wrote. Outside, the rain began again, practicing its patience. Inside, I practiced mine.